make, as you can see, is made from scratch. This is the beginnings of an ear wire. You can see that I balled up a little silver on the end. But that's what artisan jewelry means. It means that it's all handmade.
If you get a particular design that I like, or a particular design that you get rolling, and you make 6 pearls in a pod, for instance, are they all the same?
Once I come up with a design that I like, or some kind of a feature of the design that I like to make sure that it has legs, that I can make additional pieces that are in the family but not exactly the same. And then there are times when I do make a series of pieces that are the same, but you know, like, so for instance, these earrings that I'm working on, or these earrings that I'm working on.
And now hold those up just for a minute.
Okay. Here, for instance, are a pair of earrings that I'm working on that are part of what I'm calling this pod series. And while they are similar in style to these earrings, you can see that they're actually very different. These will hang from the ear, and these will go into the ear on a post. They'll both have some sort of stone or pearl that's encased in this silver to protect it, and that's what gives it that pod feeling, but no two are ever really the same.
All these jewels, the gems, the pearls.
So I source my gems and pearls from all different places. Some of them I buy online. Some of them I actually can shop for from local cutters. I've had a few pieces of stone actually cut for me custom on Etsy, where I will, you know, draw out exactly what I want, give them the specifications, the height of the stone, the length of the stone, and they'll cut it for me. When I was in San Francisco recently, I went down to Chinatown and found a great source, for instance, for freshwater pearls. So you never know where they're going to come from. I like to keep an open mind. Mostly I buy the stones because I like them rather than having something special in mind, and I always find some use for them.
And you say you don't have something special in mind. How do you come up with these designs? You just come up and you look at the stone and then you make something cool, or you think of something cool and then you go and source the stones or the pearls? How do you develop all this stuff?
I think in terms of developing designs or working from the stone out or the piece into the stone, you know, inside out or outside in, it's just a matter of kind of what hits you. I draw things. Allow me to get up and show you. A sketchbook, for instance, in which I can't exactly tell you where the inspiration comes from. They'll come from all different places. These were variations on a round pendant that I was going to pierce. Piercing is when you drill holes in a piece of metal and then saw out a design so that there's a negative positive element. And this is the one that I actually ended up making. And then when I finally do make something, I try to make sure that I have some sort of a record of it. These drawings were inspired by the New York skyline. I have not yet made a piece out of them because I haven't quite figured out how I want to do it, but it's there for when I come back to it next year or the year after.
Now, I just happen to be focused in on the piece that you're wearing. Did you? I mean, do you ever just sit around and say, "Here, I have a piece of metal and I have a piece of stone. Let me start on this."
That's what happened with this piece. I had several circles stamped out of silver that I was playing with. I had a chunk of silver that is this rectangular piece, and I did a process called reticulation, wherein you heat the metal and quench it, heat the metal and quench it to try to bring all of the fine silver content of the metal to the surface, because that makes it easier to ripple the metal. Then you go in very close with a torch and you can actually make sort of designs on the metal. You can see where it actually ripples. It's actually burnt, and then the metal is molten and starts to make these furrows and designs. One of the designs that I ended up with was a hole in one of the circles, and from those pieces that I had, I cut them up and then assembled this. So this really came out of the metal itself. And then you can see on the back that I incorporated some brass as well, just to give it a little bit of additional life and design, because this is a piece that I was keeping. I won't sell this piece because, first of all, it was too much work, and second of all, I could never ever make another one the same. And then this amethyst I happen to have in my collection, and it was just a really nice piece to offset the whole thing. So I hinged the top to the bottom. You can see I made the chain as well. This chain is made from straight up wire that's been sawed and cut into little circles and bent into circles and then soldered. Each circle is soldered shut. Then they're bent to look like this, and then they are assembled into this chain. Now this one is...
No, wait a minute. Are you telling me you made every single link to that chain?
That's why it's called artisan jewelry. I made every single link to this chain. I start out with flat wire like this. This is very thin wire, and the chain that I'm wearing is much thicker. I form it into rings, and I wrap it around a mandrel, around and around and around. Cut the rings open. Solder each ring individually shut like this. This one is open, but I would solder that shut. And then stretch those first like this, so they become oblong. Then I bend them over so they go like this into sort of a shape that's, I don't know how to explain what this shape is, but it's an oblong that's been squished in the middle and then bent around a mandrel. And then once I have enough of these pieces to make a chain, then I put them together, which is another process in and of itself. And then you end up with a chain. One of the things that I do most in making jewelry are these pods that I showed you. Now these pods are just formed by hand. I mean, with a minimal amount of hammering, because they're, you know, they're pretty uncomplicated. But when you get to something like this is called an anticlastic shaping, forming of metal, because it bends in two ways. It's bending that way, but it's also bending this way. So you can see that this started out as a flat piece of metal like this one, where I cut it and soldered it together, put it on a mandrel like this, put it on a stake like this one, and hammered it through the various stages, the depths of the stake, in order to get it to do this. So this started out as a flat piece of metal. This was the intermediary step, and then this is where it got to. So this is going to be a pair of earrings as well, eventually. I prototype everything in copper or in brass before I make it out of silver, because silver is expensive and copper is cheap. So this piece started out as a flat piece of silver. I've already soldered the ear wire onto it. I've shaped it on the mandrel and gotten it where I wanted it to go. And that's where these hammers come in really handy. Because when the metal is flat, you start out with a bigger hammerhead to hammer into these crevices in order to make it take shape. And as you get into deeper and deeper, you switch to a narrower hammerhead until you get to this one, which is the ultimate spiculum hammer. These are also called spiculums because if you closed it all the way, it would be a spiculum. But when I leave them open and then I set gems into them. But you can see how this hammerhead can fit in here, and this big fat one that we started with can't. So hammers are a big deal, and I love my hammers. So these are great. And these are one of the few things that I actually bought new. Some of the really important tools that jewelers use are cutting tools. And in order to cut a straight line in metal, which is not an easy thing to do with a saw, you can see that the line of this is very, very straight. What we use is, this is called a bench shear. So you put the piece on here, tighten this guy down, and shove this forward, and it makes a very, very clean cut into metal. This guy is called a bench press, and what it does is you turn it on, it's got a drill in it, and you can repeatedly make holes of exactly the same size and exactly straight up and down. This guy is called a rolling mill. And what a rolling mill does is it flattens metal and it also thins it out. You can also use a rolling mill to imprint a pattern into metal by taking a pattern sheet, something that already has a pattern on it, putting it on top of the piece of metal, wrapping it in cardboard and sliding it through, and then the metal will pick up the imprint. But I mostly use rolling mills to thin metal out, because if sometimes you'll want a thinner gauge metal than you have, and if you have something that's too thick to use, you can cut it, run it through here a few times until you get it nice and thin. It actually squishes it. It's kind of like a pop. So all of these bracelets are subject to the process that I just described. They start out as you know, just rolls of metal, sterling silver. These are sterling silver. These are red brass, or it's also called new gold. This is called nickel silver. And they all have a different look. Sterling silver takes up a real high polish. Nickel silver has this sort of pre-blackened feel. And depending on how highly you polish the red brass, it looks almost like gold. But they all start out as, you know, straight wire. I shape them. First I shape the bracelet, solder that together, flatten it. You can see this is half round wire. That means it's, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's not full round, it's half round. And the half round wire has to be flattened so that it sits comfortably on the wrist. So the first thing I do is flatten, you know, the actual wrist piece.
Now, do you sketch each one of these out, or you just go for
No, these
broke?
are free form. Every one of these is just a free form, whatever kind of hits me as I'm doing it. Then there's one very long piece, about 60 inches, of metal that I start with on one end and weave through. Now, as I'm weaving it through, it hardens, because metal does something called work hardening. So I can do maybe 2 or 3 rounds on here before I have to actually put it back on the soldering table, heat it up so that the metal softens again, and then I can make another 2 or 3 turns. Then I have to heat it up again, another 2 or 3 turns. One of the reasons that I like the nickel silver so much is it's quite pliable, and I'm able to do very interesting things with it that I can't do with brass. I could do it with sterling, but again, I like to prototype things in less expensive materials first.
Hold up 2 side by side, and let's look at them. So
this one is fairly conservative in a sense.
Each design is unique.
Each one of these is unique. Some of them are much more intricate than others. You can see on this one I sort of started at the very end and wove it through and back in and on top of itself, and actually made knots and things like that. So this one's very complex. This one is much more straightforward and just very elegant and simple, and, you know, like that.
Very nice. Let's take a look at the other bracelets, the pod series, if you will.
So these start out as I showed you with the things on the stake before, on those little earrings. These start out as the flat pieces of metal. Now this band was also reticulated, the same process that I used for this. And here's another example of reticulation. You can see how when you reticulate, you get these incredibly wonderful designs in the metal. Again, no two alike. And then after it's been reticulated, then I shape it on those things, and then once it's shaped to the point where I like it, then I start to set the pearls in. And then once the pearls are in, and the pearls are wired in there, once they're in and I like them, then I start to close it up. And you can see that I close it in different ways. But my jewelry isn't symmetrical, and I'm not looking for that kind of a look. I'm really into sort of this rough kind of, you know, eclectic look, because that's what I like. So I don't make jewelry because I think other people are going to like it. I make it because I like it. And if they like it, that's great. It's very gratifying. And if they don't like it, that's fine too.
How long until we see this stuff on the shelves at Walmart?
You'll never see it on the shelves at Walmart. First of all, the price point is too high. These cost me over $100 just to make them. So I really can't sell them for less than $300 or $400 a piece. Because if you take into account the time, I mean, I'm not making much, believe me. I'm not making anything. It's just, what I'm trying to do is just fuel my own hobby and get to the point where someday I can move to Asheville and just do nothing but make jewelry all the time.